When you think of the Second World War, you may think of soldiers on the front line, all of them men. But World War II was also an important time for women as they stepped into traditionally male roles. None got closer to the front line than Lee Miller, an official war correspondent for Vogue magazine. The American photographer had been close friends with Pablo Picasso and Man Ray. Now an exhibition in London is showing her war photography as part of a series on women at war. Belle Lupton reports.
Each one is a work of art, but as a group, they tell a story. These are the photographs of Lee Miller, and the story they tell is of the Second World War, seen through women's eyes. It's a story that might never have been told if it weren't for her son.
Well, during her lifetime, my mum was very careful to give the impression that her journalism had amounted to nothing. And so after she died, my late wife was absolutely astonished to find in the attic of her old farmhouse this huge stash, which is just about everything that you've seen here in this show, and more. There were 60,000 negatives, about 20,000 beautiful prints.
Of the 150 photographs on display here, around 2/3 of them haven't been seen since the war. They were hidden away, a lot of them, in Lee Miller's attic. And that's indicative of her nature as a person and as an artist. As a young girl, she was raped by a friend of the family, a secret she kept even from her husband. Miller's career started in front of the camera as a fashion model in New York during the 1920s, but it soon became apparent that her ambitions lay on the other side of the lens.
From her fashion work in New York, she went to live in Paris in the wonderful period of pre-war Paris, 1929 to 1932. She was Man Ray's lover and muse and model and pupil, and much of photography that she learned was from him. What we see here, 1940, she's joined Vogue Studios as a freelancer. And I think this is a kind of test piece, if you like, to convince them that she's still capable of making these fabulously glamorous fashion photographs.
When World War II broke out, Miller was ready to move on.
Lee was one of just 4 women to be accredited as photojournalists during the Second World War. So Lee was in a unique position, and she was the sole woman among a horde of GIs, American soldiers. And the photographs that she took for a woman's magazine, a fashion magazine, were in fact the sort of pictures that you would expect to see in Life magazine or a hard-edged news publication.
Like this one, the image of a French woman accused of collaborating with the Germans. Her head is shaved in punishment.
And this photograph shows her being interrogated prior to being paraded through the streets. Now, Lee's photograph of her has an empathy which is unique to a woman. Only a woman can really understand the depth of shame that this woman feels.
Miller witnessed the Normandy landings and recorded the first use of napalm. In war, her camera was her weapon.
This photograph shows a Parisian woman of the French resistance in August 1944. Everything she's wearing marks her out as a member of the resistance. It's a form of uniform.
The subject has her hair done in a victory roll, and her full pleated dress deliberately flouts German rationing of fabric.
So she's defying German regulations, resisting in the only way she knows how. And this was a form of costume that Lee Miller herself personally understood extremely well and therefore photographed. She had an empathy and an understanding.
The most iconic image in the exhibition is one taken at the end of the war.
Lee Miller is sitting in a bathtub here. It's probably the only bathtub in Munich that has hot water in this moment. It's Hitler's bath. This is Hitler's house. They suddenly realized they had the scoop of the century, so they dressed the set. They took this photograph, which is a vanity portrait by Heinrich Hoffmann of Hitler. By placing it there on the edge of the tub, that is the most perfect snub, because it's like taking a sacred icon and trashing it. But the key to this photograph is actually the boots, because the morning of this day, those boots had carried Lee Miller around Dachau, and right now she is stamping the filth and the agony and the degradation of that place into Hitler's nice, clean bath mat. What she and Sherman had no way of knowing was at 4:45 that afternoon, way across Germany in Berlin, Hitler and Eva Braun had just killed themselves.
The images Miller had taken during the war haunted her afterwards, and her career nosedived as she turned to alcohol.
When I knew her, she was a pretty serious alcoholic, because the post-traumatic stress of what she had seen really nearly destroyed her. She became alcohol dependent and very depressive, and that led to a very conflicted relationship with me.
Once you saw all of this work, how did your opinion of your mother change?
Oh, completely. The woman I had known as a useless drunk, I completely re-evaluated to the person who achieved all of this. It was a cathartic experience.
But abandoning the camera didn't mean giving up on life, and she reinvented herself as a gourmet cook.
Surrealism hit the kitchen head on. She had these totally wild, outlandish dishes. And pleasing her friends was important to her, so all her crazy artist friends would absolutely love it. And she got written up in Vogue and House and Garden, and this was a wonderful footnote, well, no, final chapter to her career.
Model, photographer, journalist and cook, Lee Miller's story is the story of women's changing roles in the 20th century. Belle Lupton, TRT World, London.
Fascinating collection. Well,